Chelsea's search for a manager still rumbles on. New names are being talked about all the time, but today we're going to focus in particular on Xabi Alonso and Xavi Hernandez. Welcome, Blue Believers, to another episode of the Stamford Sync, where we are syncing up with everything Chelsea FC. And like I said, today, that means we're going to talk about Xabi Alonso versus Xavi Hernandez, and who do we think would be the better fit for our team right now. So news has started circulating recently that there are discussions internally about Xavi Hernandez as an option, and I hadn't really looked into him a huge amount, to be honest. But I use this as an opportunity to dive a little bit further into his managerial career, and I've already looked in quite a lot to Xabi Alonso, but I think there's some really, really interesting things to look at when comparing the two managers' kind of style, how they might fit this current Chelsea team with a couple of additions, but also which players currently that we have on the books might benefit or suffer from each of these individual manager styles. So let's not mess around and just get into it. I've whipped up another handy-dandy comparison chart, and we are looking at specifically Xabi Alonso's 23-24 Bayer Leverkusen invincible double season, and Xavi Hernandez when he won the title with Barcelona in 22-23. So as of right now, these are the most successful periods for these managers. So for me, it gives us the best look at their, when they were successful, what were their teams like and how did they make it work. So first off, as before, we are going to look at league context. Xabi Alonso was the Bundesliga champion in 23-24 with Bayer Leverkusen. They went unbeaten for the entire season, and for me, that is impressive anywhere. It is not unprecedented, obviously, because it happens, but going invincible, as much as I hate to say it, is such an impressive feat. And for Xabi Alonso to do that and win 2 trophies in such an early part of his managerial career is absolutely phenomenal. So Xavi Hernandez in 22-23 with Barcelona was the champion of the league that year in La Liga. Came first, 88 points. Which is a pretty impressive tally at the end of the day. When you think about, we talk about it in the Premier League, and although it hasn't happened as much recently, 90 points plus was crazy, and it's very rare, or only once ever, like City with the Centurions, weren't they? But 88 points is a very, very respectable tally for a league win. When you think about the last time we won the league with Antonio Conte, we did it with 74 points. So that is a lot of games differences, a really, really huge amount. So maybe, although not quite as shiny as Alonso's Leverkusen win, because he did it with an unexpected team as well. That's the other thing, isn't it? Xavi Hernandez did really well with that Barcelona team, but Xabi Alonso proved that he could go up against the giants in Bayern Munich and take them on with nowhere near the same amount of resources. So instantly, I would surmise that Xabi Alonso's time at Leverkusen was a bit more impressive than Xavi Hernandez at Barcelona, but that's where we are in terms of the context of the seasons that we're looking at. Right, so defensive record. I think these are really, really, really important, and it's a little bit wild, actually. So goals conceded per game, 0.72 goals conceded per game for Xabi Alonso's Bayer Leverkusen in 23-24, which was the best in the Bundesliga. That is ridiculously impressive anyway. We looked at Fabregas versus Andoni Iraola the other day. Fabregas also has a particularly impressive defensive record with Como in Serie A this season. I think it was 0.74, which again, with a lot less resources, is really impressive. But then we move on to Xavi Hernandez at Barcelona in that season, 0.53 goals. So barely half a goal conceded per game across the entire season. That is wild. That in that year was also the best in Europe's top 5 leagues, and that is not a surprise at all. I've done a few of these kind of things recently, and I haven't seen anything that low. So it's going to make a little bit more sense when we get into the rest of the video. It is definitely part of their styles, right? Because Xabi Alonso, as we will get into, maybe a little bit more cavalier, not like super cavalier, but just more cavalier in terms of, high press and, there's more space to exploit and stuff. So for Xabi Alonso to even get that, which was the best in the Bundesliga that year, is super impressive with the style of football that he's playing. But because of Xavi Hernandez's particular style of play, which focuses a lot more on control, that makes sense that he's got a slightly better defensive record because I guess he's leaving less space. But either way, so impressive. And if Alonso or Xavi Hernandez are able to give us that kind of defensive record in the Premier League, that would be phenomenal for a start. Right, possession. Now, this is where it gets really interesting because, we'll start with Xavi Hernandez. As you would expect, 65% possession. That's crazy, man. 60% is, I think Man City are 60%. And in general, big teams that play possession style football, 60% is kind of the figure that you hover around at when you're in a possession-based team. But 65% for Xavi Hernandez just shows how entrenched that Barcelona style that he was so pivotal to being a part of as a player has affected the way that he manages games, and possession is the absolute key to him. 100%, he's going to try and keep the ball for as long as possible. Now, we'll move back to Xabi Alonso in this. it's 59% is really, really, really impressive, especially when you consider what we're going to get onto in terms of the rest of his style of play. So even though Xavi Hernandez is like crazy possession-based, Xabi Alonso still plays a possession-based game, albeit a little bit differently, but to have 59% possession in the Bundesliga with that Bayer Leverkusen team is really, really, really impressive. So we're going to move into the build-up style. Both managers prefer positional build-up play, so that is just a thing, but there is a difference where Xabi Alonso's is controlled, but essentially what that means is he is more likely to allow the players to react dynamically to things that are going on around them. Whereas Xavi Hernandez is positional and structured based on the La Masia principles, obviously. But what that means in practice and in context is his team aren't really given much freedom at all. It's very much, when this thing happens, this is what you do. You need to be here all of the time. You need to anticipate this thing, and if this guy moves there, you need to move over there. So essentially, in a nutshell, in terms of build-up style, Xavi Hernandez's Barcelona were a lot more rigid and they weren't given much in the way of freedom, whereas Xabi Alonso's team were allowed to react dynamically to the things going on around them. So that's interesting because we seem to have, at Chelsea, a mix of players that some seem to benefit more from. Moises Caicedo, for instance, seems to benefit from very rigid tactical instruction. And then you've got your players like Cole Palmer, for instance, who maybe flourish a lot better when given that little bit of freedom. So we're going to get onto it a little bit later, but I do think that each manager actually represents positives and negatives for some of the players that we've got at the moment. It'll be really interesting to see how that gets handled. And guys, if you've made it this far into the comparison already, please do me the distinct honour of liking and sharing the video, subscribe to the channel, or just roast me in the comments, whatever gets you through your day. All right, now let's get back to it. So, pressing intensity. Pressing intensity for Xabi Alonso's team is a medium-high press. That always worries me a little bit. It's the thing that worried me about Iraola, and when I spoke about him in my last video as well, like we at the moment just are not set up for a high press. Maybe that can be coached into the players, but we don't have the centre-backs for it. At the moment, we just absolutely do not have the centre-backs to handle a high press, and more importantly, we definitely don't have the goalkeeper to handle a high press either. So if we are going to get a high-pressing manager, whether it be Xabi Alonso or Iraola, the centre-back stuff is so... We need new centre-backs, like 100%, two probably. We're going to have to literally rebuild our centre-backs from the bottom up, our defence from the bottom up, to accommodate for this high press, because we've seen how many times we got torn apart by teams when it was Liam Rosenior. Now, the other part of that is Liam Rosenior maybe wasn't as good at coaching that idea into these players, and maybe one of these guys could do better. Now, Xavi preferred a high press as well. Now, and this is the thing, so it looks like a common factor across, maybe apart from Fabregas, to be honest. Fabregas did like a kind of medium block, a bit less of a high press. But it looks like the majority of the managers that we are looking at for this job like a high press, essentially. And that is just terrifying, isn't it? It's just absolutely terrifying. But if, this is the majority of the managers that we're looking at who play this kind of style, then ultimately, like I said before, the centre-back situation is absolutely going to need to be dealt with. Tempo and passes per game. So, as you would expect, we'll start with Xavi again. 600 plus passes per game across the season. Wild. Absolutely outrageous. But that's your 65% possession there. Do you know what I mean? But again, this is the interesting thing. 515 passes per game for Xabi Alonso's Bayer Leverkusen. So, albeit a little bit more transitional, a little bit more gun-ho, and, obviously a really, really high press, Xabi Alonso did still focus on possession. And what I'm starting to see from going through all of these, I think Xabi Alonso's style of football is essentially what Liam Rosenior wanted to do but wasn't able to. We can put that down to players, we can put that down to him just not being a good enough coach, but it looks like the core philosophy of Xabi Alonso's football is actually not a million miles away from Liam Rosenior, but based on his Leverkusen outing in particular, he was a lot better at getting the team to kind of buy into that idea. So, chance creation, structured and pattern-based for Xabi Alonso's Leverkusen, and wide overloads and positional play with wing focus for Xavi Hernandez. Now, I don't love the wide thing, if I'm completely honest, and I've got a bit of PTSD from the Maresca ball. Do you know what I mean? Maresca ball was literally get the ball out wide, look for an opportunity. If there isn't one, recycle it back. And we saw that so much. It was absolutely ridiculous. Like, for instance, comparatively, Fabregas' style of play is a lot less about holding the width and, looking for opportunities from wide as it is getting the ball through the middle. And I just I would not love to see us go back to this thing where it's like, oh, look, give Pedro Neto the ball on the right and he'll run up there and he'll turn around and pass it back. And then it'll get recycled into the midfielders. They'll pass it back to the centre-backs. They'll get it back up to the midfielder on the other side, and then they'll get it up to Alejandro Garnacho, who will run at his man and fail to beat him. Oh, it's just boring, isn't it? It's just boring. And look, until things started going badly, Maresca was doing all right, and we were getting wins out of it, but it was a torrid style of football to watch. It just wasn't very fun at all. So structured, pattern-based chance creation from Xabi Alonso, I think, would be a bit more aesthetically pleasing, and maybe not quite so predictable and boring, because the issue with Maresca ball and the wide thing is, like, you just man-mark our wingers, and that's it. Like, we can't do anything, and we're just constantly recycling the ball back. So I don't love the wing thing, to be completely honest, and it's a tick on the Xabi Alonso side for me there. I would much rather see us trying to play the ball through the middle. And obviously he played with wing backs as well, so it's not that there was no width. Of course there was, but that allowed, because he played with wing backs, it allowed his attackers to spend more time drifting inside, which is where you want to see him. Right, XG profile, really, really, really interesting here. And again, this really highlights the difference between the two managers, I think. So for Xabi Alonso's Bayer Leverkusen in their invincible season, their XG was 2.214, so they were expected to score 2.2 goals a game, and only 0.83 against in expected goals, which isn't a million miles away off of their defensive record, so that's actually really impressive. With Xavi Hernandez at Barcelona, it was 1.85 but 0.8 against, so he was expected to score slightly less goals, but also on the other side of that, a 0.03 is not much of a difference, but their defence technically was a little bit better and they faced less shots, or less XG in general. So kind of what this tells you for me is that Xabi Alonso's football is more conducive to chances, right? More chance creation, essentially. You know, what are we talking about? It's 0.3, 0.4, so nearly half a chance more, nearly half an expected goal more, per game with Xabi Alonso's Leverkusen team in that season. But that does make sense, because you think that kind of marries up with the possession stats. That 0.4 XG or whatever is probably substituted in Xavi Hernandez's structure by that extra 5% possession. They were hanging on to the ball a lot more. So again, the picture that this is starting to paint for me is that both managers definitely seem to be about possession and controlled play. Xabi Alonso's football sounds more fun to watch. In a nutshell, that's kind of where I'm getting at the moment. Defensive shape. So for Xabi Alonso's Leverkusen, it was a high line and they were compact off the ball. For Xavi's Barcelona, it was a mid-high line, extremely compact with low space allowed. So again, the high line thing, that is... Oh, I don't love it. And like I say, this is another thing. I'm just getting Rosiña vibes, but not in terms of like Xabi Alonso would be anywhere near as bad as Rosiña, because obviously absolutely awful. But at the same time, it seems like his style of football, because Liam Rosiña wanted to focus on possession, but Liam Rosiña also wanted that high line. If that is something that we go for, like the goalkeeper has to change. It's so important that we've got a better goalkeeper that can, definitely be more part like an auxiliary defender and is confident coming out and claiming the ball and playing high up when the team is pushing high. We Robert Sanchez wouldn't last 5 minutes under either of these managers, I don't think, to be completely honest. Attacking width, very wide for both teams. Fullbacks, obviously, with Xabi Alonso, because he played wingbacks, he had Jeremy Frimpong and Grimaldo. And they also drifted into midfield as well, so I did find that very interesting. And with Xavi, it's very wide, wingers hold width, fullbacks vary, so that's kind of as we expect. It's actually quite interesting. The vibe I'm getting, although not completely, is as much as Xabi Alonso seems to be more towards the Rosiña side of things, it seems that Xavi Hernandez's tactical style in general seems to be a lot more like Maresca. So we're not even really looking at like completely different versions of the football we've been seeing. I think I'm leaning towards Xabi Alonso at the moment. Game control, Xabi Alonso's Leverkusen very high, dictates games, and obviously based on the possession stats, Xavi Hernandez's Barcelona extremely high with possession dominance. So with Xavi Hernandez's Barcelona, and I imagine the teams that he would want to put together, because he has that kind of philosophy, keeping hold of the ball is the most important thing, even more so than creating chances. Keep hold of the ball and the chances will come, is kind of what I'm getting from Xavi Hernandez over here. But with Xabi Alonso, it seems to be possession is important, but creating chances is more important. And you can kind of see that with some of the things that we're talking about here. He's got the higher XG, he does a high press, and even little things like the fact that he dynamically allows his players to respond and react to things around him. Like, the possession stat, 59% in itself, shows you that he's obviously, is very concerned with controlling the game. I do think that possession seems to be the absolute raison d'etre of Xavi Hernandez's Barcelona, where it was a core principle, but definitely not the first thing for Xabi Alonso's Bayer Leverkusen. And then it comes down to watchability. Very high, dominant and entertaining for Xabi Alonso's Bayer Leverkusen, and that kind of makes sense. It doesn't sound as basketball as Iraola. Obviously, if you watch the video I did about Iraola, it was very like back and forth. It looks like Xabi Alonso, and I think Iraola's possession stat was only like in, sort of 51, 52, something like that. So you're still getting that kind of chaos attacking football, but Xabi Alonso's defensive structure and game control seems to be higher than Andoni Iraola's at this point in time. And yeah, with Xavi Hernandez, as you'd expect, it's of high watchability, it's controlled, methodical, defensive dominance. So the defending's a huge part. And Xavi Hernandez seems like he's less likely to leave space. Like, there's less risk, I think, with Xavi Hernandez's football than there is with Xabi Alonso's, but that's the kind of trade-off, isn't it? So there's less risk with Xavi Hernandez's La Masia Barcelona-style passing football because they hold onto the ball for so long, but they also create less chances, whereas with Xabi Alonso, looks like he's more likely to create some issues. Not issues, but, the way that they play is going to leave more space, and that is going to mean that we are going to need better defenders than what we've got. So we'll do this, as we did last time, a little look at the key strengths comparison between the two. So both managers are pretty good for control and structure. As you can see, they're both pretty focused on possession. League readiness, neither of them have experience in the Premier League. And I actually wanted to take a moment to talk about this because this really got me thinking. Like, I've really just been thinking about this. I've seen a lot of fans in my comments and a lot of fans like across YouTube and the internet and social media talking about how important it is that the next manager we get in has Premier League experience. And do you know what? I actually just don't necessarily think that's true at all. Obviously, we're talking about Iraola, Glasner's maybe an option, Marco Silva's being thrown around as well. But then I'm like, hold on a second. I'm going to sit and think back to a lot of the managers that we've had that have come in and won for us, right? Jose Mourinho, no Premier League experience, came in and won the league in his second season. Okay, cool. Antonio Conte, no Premier League experience, comes in and wins the league in his first season. Okay, cool. Thomas Tuchel, no Premier League experience, wins the Champions League with a very severely defunct team at the end of the day. We were really struggling. But again, absolutely no Premier League experience. And I'm just thinking, like, all of these managers that have come in and won stuff for us haven't got Premier League experience in terms of managing in the Premier League. So I'm starting to think it's actually not that important in the grand scheme of things. And I guess what you could argue is, like, culturally it's important. So I guess that gives Xabi Alonso the tick, really, although I haven't marked it as one, gives Xabi Alonso the kind of tick there because he's got a storied playing career here. He understands the culture. He understands how things work. But what they both have is they are absolutely legends. Do you know what I mean? They've both won their leagues. They've both won the Champions League. Xabi Alonso in particular did it all over. He did it in England. Well, he didn't win the Premier League in England, but he was amazing for Liverpool and won the Champions League with them. He went to Real Madrid and won loads, and then he went to Bayern Munich and won loads. So, they've both got really storied careers. And obviously, Xavi Hernandez is part of one of the most incredible teams ever put together, ever. Pep Guardiola's Barcelona team was absolutely phenomenal. So what you do get with both managers is they come in and there's respect for the playing career. Absolutely, there's respect for the playing career. But I do think that just in terms of Premier League readiness, and I'm starting to, like I say, change my mind about how important I think this is. For instance, Pep Guardiola had never been in the Premier League and then won it like 6 times in a row. Whatever, do you know what I mean? It's crazy. But I do think that Xabi Alonso has a little bit more just because he spent a lot more time here. Right, pressing intensity, both of them like a high press, defensive organisation. I guess actually, to be fair, Xavi comes out on top of this, but it is really, really finite. It's a very fine difference. Xavi Hernandez faced less XG and conceded a lot less goals. Like 0.5 goals per game is absolutely unbelievable. But 0.72 for Xabi Alonso in that invincible Leverkusen season is incredible as well. It's just, it seems like a big difference, but at the end of the day, they were both title winners. Chaos and attacking upside definitely falls to Xabi Alonso's style of football, which like I say, is more kind of in that Rosinia/Iraola kind of ballpark, although possession is really, really important. You're not going to get a lot of chaos and attacking upside in that respect from Xavi. It seems like things are going to be a little bit slower, and maybe we go back to that Maresca era of funneling things out wide and, taking our time until the chances present themselves. And the long-term possession identity, again, really falls to Xavi Hernandez here just because that is 100% the core principle of how he plays his football. And with Xabi Alonso, though, like, it would be disingenuous to say that possession isn't a key thing because it absolutely is. Like 59% possession, that is a possession-dominant team. And he did that and being unbeaten as well. So to keep that high possession and be unbeaten that entire season, despite leaving opportunities in his style of play with, the high press and the chaos and stuff like that. But, inarguably, Xavi Hernandez's long-term possession identity is going to be more of a thing. So that's it, guys. That's it. That is the comparison of the two managers, and I find it really, really interesting. Like I said, I haven't done a couple of these now. It's all starting to come together in terms of the kind of different managers that we're looking for, and they all do share a lot of similar principles, really, apart from Iraola, who seems a lot more gun-ho than the rest of them, basically. But Xavi Hernandez, Cesc Fabregas, Xabi Alonso, these guys are all possession people in at the end of the day, although Xabi Alonso does seem like the football would be a little bit more fun to watch, albeit it would create a few more openings for us to get punished with. So the thing that I think is a little bit interesting as well, I've mentioned it a few times, is I think there might be a few players that benefit and do not benefit from each of these managers' particular styles of play. So I've picked one player that will benefit and one player that will suffer under each manager, and we'll start with Xabi Alonso. I think a player that would really, really benefit from Xabi Alonso's system is Reece James. Reece James is obviously a lot better than Frimpong was, and Frimpong's good, don't get me wrong, like really, really good player, obviously not setting the world light at Liverpool, but in that Leverkusen system he was incredible. But the way that Xavi Hernandez plays with his wing backs, they underlap, they overlap, they do create width, but also they do get inside. And I think that Reece James is such an all-round player that should he be able to stay fit, I think as a wing back in Xabi Alonso's system, Reece James would be absolutely on fire. And in terms of a player that wouldn't maybe do so well, I mean, I'm not sure he'd do well under either of these managers, but specifically with Alonso, I think is Robert Sanchez. I think his technical ceiling is just not high enough to play the kind of football. A, it's possession-based. B, there's a high line. There's a lot of pressure put on the goalkeeper. Robert Sanchez did okay under Enzo Maresca, and that is why I think that, albeit I don't think he'd be amazing for either manager, I think for Xavi Hernandez maybe this isn't so much of a problem. But with Xabi Alonso, like, he's going to be expected to play out from the back a little bit. He's going to be expected to be an auxiliary defender because of the high press. And I think he would absolutely just get torn to shreds when Xabi Alonso is making this high press and putting all of that pressure on Robert Sanchez to be safe hands. Like, I just don't think it would work. And as far as Xavi Hernandez's system goes, I think it would really benefit Levi Colwill. Lots of ball circulation, positional discipline, defensive compactness. I think his system would definitely suit a Levi Colwill playing on that left side. We already know that Maresca really liked Levi Colwill because of how good of a passer he was. And I'm not saying that he wouldn't play well under Alonso, but I think Levi Colwill is a player that would definitely benefit from the core principles of Xavi Hernandez's system. But the player that I think might not necessarily do that well from it, and this is a bit of a weird one, I actually think it's Moises Caicedo. Moises Caicedo is like, so the sitting midfielder in Xavi Hernandez's system is not a guy that runs around and covers loads of ground. And it's a bit disingenuous, but because obviously he was such a good player in this kind of position, but you think Xavi Hernandez is probably going to want his own version of Sergio Busquets, who was an absolutely phenomenal player, but was not a marauding midfielder. He was a tempo dictator. He sat in the middle of the park and looked for opportunities and sprayed passes. Moises Caicedo's got a great pass on him, but one of Moises Caicedo's greatest strengths is his ability to cover so much ground and get involved with the attack, as well as being really good and dogged defensively. So I do think that I don't think Moises Caicedo would be bad under Xavi Hernandez, but I do not think that Xavi Hernandez would use Moises Caicedo to the best of his ability, essentially. And I think that he is a player that would not be able to be his best self. Now, I'd love to know what you guys think about this in the comments. So just to reiterate on that point, I said I think Reece James would be really, really good for Alonso. I think Robert Sanchez, absolutely not. And for Xavi Hernandez, I think Levi Colwill would really benefit, but I think that Moises Caicedo might actually find it a little bit difficult to play his best football. So that's it, guys. That's my comparison on Xabi Alonso's invincible double winning Bayer Leverkusen team, and also Xavi Hernandez's Barcelona, who won the league with 88 points and a 0.53 goals against record in that season. Is absolutely phenomenal. Having gone through all this, I'm definitely leaning towards Xabi Alonso. The thing is, there's a lot of reasons why this is going to be difficult. Like, they're not really substantiated, but there are rumours coming out at the moment saying that Xabi Alonso is asking for full sporting control. And yeah, of course, because look at what he did when he was given full sporting control. When he didn't have full sporting control on Real Madrid, didn't necessarily work out that well for him either, did it? So I would just say give it to him. If we are serious about going in for a Xabi Alonso, like, Fabregas is still my guy, don't get me wrong, that's my dream pick, but in terms of winning experience, Xabi Alonso's got it. He's definitely got it. That, what he did at Bayer Leverkusen was absolutely incredible, and even what he did at Real Madrid, when you look at how Arbeloa is performing now, wasn't actually necessarily his fault. So I do find it all very interesting. So yeah, like I say, guys, I think for me, I'm leaning towards Xabi Alonso as my pick out of the two. But I'd love to know what you think. So get in the comments and tell me what you reckon. Nice one, guys. I hope you're all having an absolutely wicked day, and I'll catch up with you very, very soon. Take it easy. Peace.